I never thought that my mundane life in the quiet town of Fogwood could be interrupted by anything other than the occasional gossip at the local diner. Yet, here I was, standing at the edge of my driveway, holding a letter that defied all logic. The envelope, yellowed with age, bore the unmistakable handwriting of Emily. Emily, who had been dead for over a year. I remember the day Emily died as if it were yesterday. The fog had rolled in thick that morning, swallowing the town whole. Emily had gone out for her usual jog but never returned. They found her body by the old oak tree, her eyes wide open, as if she had seen something beyond this world. "Mr. Whitman, are you all right?" my neighbor, Mrs. Abernathy, called out, snapping me back to the present. She was an elderly woman with a penchant for herbal teas and tales of the supernatural. "Yes, just an old letter," I replied, my voice wavering. Her eyes, sharp despite her age, narrowed. "Strange things happen in the fog, Ethan. You should be careful." I nodded absently, my mind racing. The letter was a simple one, yet it held so much weight. "Dear Ethan, if you're reading this, it means I've left this world. But I haven't left you. Meet me at the old mansion. There's something you need to know. Love, Emily." The old mansion she mentioned was a place we had avoided during our time together. It stood on the outskirts of town, shrouded in more than just fog. It was cloaked in mystery and tales of hauntings. That night, sleep eluded me. The clock ticked away the hours as I lay in bed, Emily's letter clutched in my hand. Questions swirled in my mind. Was this some kind of sick joke? Or had Emily really found a way to reach out to me from beyond the grave? "Emily, what have you left behind for me?" I whispered into the darkness. I could almost hear her voice in response, soft and melodious, like a faint echo in the fog. "I have to know," I decided, finally sitting up. "I have to find out what happened." The next morning, with the letter safely tucked into my jacket, I headed towards the old mansion. The fog was thick, almost impenetrable, as if the town itself was trying to keep its secrets hidden. The journey felt longer than it should have, each step heavy with anticipation. When I reached the mansion, its towering silhouette loomed ominously in the fog. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying wood. I took a deep breath and pushed open the creaking gate. The mansion loomed before me, its windows like empty eyes staring into my soul. I pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped inside. The air was musty, thick with the scent of neglect and decay. The floorboards creaked under my weight as I ventured further into the darkness. Memories of Emily flooded my mind, her laughter, her smile, the way her eyes sparkled when she talked about her dreams. It was hard to believe she was gone. Harder still to believe she might be reaching out to me from beyond the grave. I found myself in the grand hall, its once magnificent chandelier now a dusty relic of the past. The letter had mentioned something I needed to know. What could Emily possibly have left behind for me to discover here? Suddenly, a chill ran down my spine. I turned, half expecting to see Emily standing there, but the hall was empty. I shook my head, trying to dispel the eerie feeling. It was just the mansion playing tricks on me. "Get a grip, Ethan," I muttered to myself. But even as I said the words, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone. I made my way to the study, where Emily used to spend hours writing in her diary. The room was just as I remembered it, filled with old books and trinkets she had collected over the years. I walked over to her desk, my heart pounding in my chest. And there it was, her diary, lying open as if she had just stepped away for a moment. I hesitated before picking it up, my hands trembling. The pages were filled with her neat handwriting, chronicling her thoughts and dreams. As I flipped through the diary, one entry caught my eye. October 12th. The fog has been thicker than usual lately. It feels like it's hiding something, like there's something just beyond my reach. I keep hearing whispers in the night, voices calling my name. I don't know what they want, but I'm scared, Ethan. I'm scared of what I might find if I follow them. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry. Emily had always been sensitive to the supernatural, but I had never taken her fears seriously. Now, standing in this eerie mansion, her words took on a new significance. "Why didn't you tell me, Emily?" I whispered, feeling a pang of guilt. Suddenly, a soft voice echoed through the room, almost like a sigh. "Because I didn't want to scare you." I froze, my heart racing. "Emily." The room was silent again, the only sound the distant creaking of the old house. I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts. I was imagining things. It was the stress and the memories playing tricks on me. As I turned to leave the study, a glint of light caught my eye. There, on the floor, was a small, ornate key. I picked it up, turning it over in my hand. It had to be important, why else would it be here? I slipped it into my pocket and left the study, determined to find out what it unlocked. The key burned a hole in my pocket as I made my way through the mansion. Each room held echoes of the past, shadows of moments long gone. I couldn't shake the feeling that Emily was watching me, guiding me towards something important. But what? As I climbed the grand staircase, the air grew colder, the fog outside pressing against the windows like eager hands trying to get in. I reached the landing and noticed a door at the end of the hallway, slightly ajar. The key in my pocket seemed to hum with energy. Pushing open the door, I found myself in a small, dimly lit room. Dust motes danced in the faint light filtering through the cracked window. At the center of the room stood an old trunk, its lock a perfect match for the key I had found. My heart raced as I inserted the key and turned it. The lock clicked open with a satisfying sound, and I lifted the lid. Inside, there were old photographs, letters, and a journal. I recognized Emily's handwriting immediately. I picked up the journal, my hands trembling. As I opened it, a photograph slipped out and fluttered to the floor. I picked it up. It was a picture of Emily and me, taken at the town's annual fair. We looked so happy, so in love. What had gone so wrong? "She's trying to tell you something," a voice said behind me. I spun around, my heart pounding. Mrs. Abernathy stood in the doorway, her expression somber. "Mrs. Abernathy, what are you doing here?" I asked, surprised and somewhat relieved to see a familiar face. "I followed you," she said simply. "I knew you'd come here." The fog has a way of drawing people in, especially those with unfinished business. I frowned. "What do you mean?" She stepped into the room, her eyes scanning the contents of the trunk. Emily was special, you know. Sensitive to things most people can't see. She believed the fog was more than just weather. She thought it was a veil between our world and the next. I looked at her, trying to process her words. "And you believe that too?" She nodded. "I've seen too much not to believe. This town has a history, Ethan. Strange things happen here, especially when the fog rolls in." I glanced back at the journal in my hands. Emily mentioned hearing whispers, voices calling her name. "Do you think?" She was being drawn to something, Mrs. Abernathy finished for me. Or someone. I shivered, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. What should I do? She looked at me, her eyes full of sympathy and something else, determination. "You need to keep reading. Emily left you a trail. Follow it, and you might find the answers you're looking for." I nodded, opening the journal to the first entry. Emily's neat handwriting filled the pages, her words a direct line to her thoughts and fears. September 30th. The fog has been relentless. It feels like it's watching me, waiting for something. I've started hearing voices, whispers in the night. They call my name, and I can't help but feel like they're trying to tell me something important. I don't know who to trust, but I know I have to find out what's happening. For both our sakes. I looked up at Mrs. Abernathy, who nodded encouragingly. "Keep going," she urged. As I continued reading, a picture began to form. Emily had been on the brink of discovering something monumental, something that had cost her life. I had to know what it was, not just for her, but for myself. Emily's journal was a labyrinth of thoughts and secrets, each page a step deeper into the unknown. With Mrs. Abernathy by my side, I felt a strange sense of courage. She seemed to understand the things Emily had written about, the supernatural forces that I was just beginning to comprehend. The next entry in Emily's journal mentioned a hidden room within the mansion. She had discovered it by accident, and it seemed to hold some importance to her. October 3rd. I found a hidden room today, behind the library. It was as if the house wanted me to find it. There were old books and artifacts, things I can't explain. I feel like I'm on the brink of understanding something, but I'm also scared. The whispers are getting louder. I looked at Mrs. Abernathy. "Do you know about a hidden room?" She nodded. "I've heard the stories. Many people believe the mansion was built on sacred ground, a place where the veil between worlds is thin. The room you're looking for is in the library, behind a false wall." We made our way to the library, the air growing colder with each step. The fog outside seemed to press harder against the windows, as if eager to seep inside. The library was a vast room filled with ancient books and dusty shelves. I scanned the walls, looking for any sign of a hidden entrance. There, Mrs. Abernathy pointed to a section of the wall that seemed slightly out of place. Together, we pushed against it, and it swung open to reveal a narrow staircase descending into darkness. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Let's go." The staircase creaked under our weight as we descended. At the bottom, we found a small, dimly lit room filled with old books, strange artifacts, and what looked like ritualistic symbols painted on the walls. It was both fascinating and terrifying. In the center of the room was a large, ancient book. It seemed to emanate a faint, eerie glow. I approached it cautiously, feeling a mix of curiosity and dread. "This must be what Emily found," I whispered, reaching out to touch the book. As my fingers brushed the cover, a shock of energy surged through me, and I stumbled back. "The book is powerful," Mrs. Abernathy said, her voice filled with awe. "It's a grimoire, a book of spells and rituals. Emily must have been studying it, trying to understand the voices she was hearing." I opened the grimoire, the pages filled with cryptic symbols and incantations. One page was marked with a small, folded piece of paper. I unfolded it to reveal Emily's handwriting. October 10th. I've deciphered some of the symbols. They speak of a ritual that can communicate with spirits, a way to bridge the gap between worlds. I think this is what the voices want me to do. But I'm afraid. What if I can't control it? What if something goes wrong? My heart pounded as I read her words. Emily had been trying to contact the spirit world, to understand the voices that had haunted her. And now, it seemed, she was guiding me to finish what she had started. "We have to be careful," Mrs. Abernathy warned. "The supernatural is not to be taken lightly. If Emily was trying to communicate with spirits, we need to make sure we do it right." I nodded, determined. I need to know what happened to her. I need to understand why she reached out to me. Together, we studied the grimoire, deciphering the symbols and preparing for the ritual. The air in the room grew heavier, charged with anticipation. As we worked, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that Emily's presence was guiding us. Finally, we were ready. The ritual required specific items, all of which were conveniently stored in the hidden room. It was as if the mansion itself had been waiting for this moment. As we set up the ritual, Mrs. Abernathy lit candles and arranged the artifacts in a precise pattern. I stood in the center, holding the grimoire, my heart racing. "Are you ready?" she asked, her eyes filled with concern. I nodded. "Let's do this." We began the ritual, chanting the ancient incantations from the grimoire. The room seemed to vibrate with energy, the air growing colder and denser. As the final words left my lips, the candles flickered, and a low hum filled the room. Suddenly, the fog outside pressed harder against the windows, and a ghostly figure began to materialize before us. It was Emily, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and urgency. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice echoing through the room. "You found me." Tears filled my eyes as I reached out to her. "Emily, what happened? Why did you bring me here?" Her form flickered, and she looked around nervously. "There's so much you don't know, so much I need to tell you. But we don't have much time. The veil between our worlds is thin, and something dark is coming." My heart pounded in my chest. "What do you mean? What's coming?" Before she could answer, a sudden force knocked me to the ground, and the room plunged into darkness. The candles extinguished, leaving us in complete blackness. I heard Mrs. Abernathy gasp, and the air grew thick with a malevolent presence. "Ethan, be careful." Emily's voice echoed faintly. "It's here." The darkness was oppressive, almost tangible. I fumbled for a match, my hands shaking, and struck it against the box. The small flame flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Mrs. Abernathy was beside me, her face pale but determined. "We need to relight the candles," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "The ritual isn't complete, and without the light, we're vulnerable." I nodded, and together we worked quickly to relight the candles. As each flame sprang to life, the malevolent presence seemed to recede, but the air remained thick with tension. Emily's ghostly form flickered back into view, her expression urgent. "Ethan, you have to listen," she said, her voice echoing around us. "There's a darkness that has been awakened. It wants to cross over into our world, and it's using the fog as a bridge. What can we do?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. "You need to complete the ritual," Emily replied. "The grimoire has the answers, but you have to be careful. The darkness is strong, and it will try to stop you." I looked at Mrs. Abernathy, who nodded in agreement. "We can do this, Ethan. We have to." I opened the grimoire, flipping through the pages until I found the continuation of the ritual. The symbols were more complex, the incantations more powerful. We began chanting again, the words resonating in the small room. The air vibrated with energy, the candles flickering wildly. Suddenly, a powerful force knocked the grimoire from my hands, and it flew across the room. The malevolent presence was back, stronger than before. The room grew colder, and a deep, guttural voice filled the air. "You cannot stop me," it hissed. "This world will be mine." I felt a cold hand grasp my shoulder, and I shuddered. "Emily, what do we do?" Her ghostly form moved closer, her eyes filled with determination. "You have to banish it, Ethan. Use the grimoire. Finish the ritual." Mrs. Abernathy retrieved the grimoire, her hand steady despite the fear that radiated from her. She handed it back to me, and I resumed chanting, louder and more forcefully. The darkness swirled around us, but the candles burned brighter, their flames defiant. As I spoke the final words of the incantation, the room shook, and the malevolent presence let out a deafening roar. The fog outside the window swirled violently, and the darkness seemed to implode, collapsing in on itself. "Now, Ethan," Emily cried. "Seal the veil." I raised my voice, shouting the last words of the ritual. The air crackled with energy, and a blinding light filled the room. The darkness recoiled, screaming in agony, and then it was gone. The fog outside dissipated, and the air grew still. I collapsed to the floor, exhausted. Emily's ghostly form hovered above me, her expression one of relief and sadness. "You did it," she whispered. "You saved us." Tears streamed down my face as I looked at her. "Emily, I'm so sorry. I should have been there for you." She smiled, a soft, ethereal glow surrounding her. "You were always with me, Ethan. Even now. I have to go, but remember, I'll always be with you." I reached out, but her form began to fade, dissolving into the light. "Emily, wait." But she was gone, leaving me with a profound sense of loss and a lingering warmth in my heart. Mrs. Abernathy helped me to my feet, her eyes filled with understanding. "She's at peace now, Ethan. And so are you." We left the mansion together, the fog lifting to reveal a clear, star-filled sky. The town of Fogwood seemed brighter, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. I knew my life would never be the same, but I also knew that Emily's love and sacrifice had given me the strength to move forward. The weeks following the events at the mansion were a blur. I tried to return to my normal routine, but the memories of that night haunted me. Mrs. Abernathy became a confidant, helping me navigate the complexities of the supernatural world and the emotional toll of losing Emily once again. One evening, as we sat in her cozy living room filled with the scent of herbal tea and the soft glow of candlelight, Mrs. Abernathy handed me a small, leather-bound book. "This belonged to Emily," she said. "She left it with me for safekeeping. I think she wanted you to have it." I took the book, feeling the familiar pang of loss mixed with gratitude. "Thank you, Mrs. Abernathy, for everything." She smiled warmly. "Call me Margaret." "And you're welcome, Ethan." Emily was special. She touched many lives, including mine. As I opened the book, I found more of Emily's thoughts and sketches. There were notes about the rituals, her fears, and her hopes. One entry stood out. October 15th. "If something happens to me, I want Ethan to know how much I love him. He gave me strength, even when he didn't realize it. I hope he can find peace and happiness, even if it's without me. And I hope he can forgive me for the secrets I kept." Tears welled up in my eyes as I read her words. Emily had been brave, facing her fears alone to protect me. I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I had to honor her memory by living a life she would be proud of. One night, a few months after our encounter with the supernatural, I was walking through Fogwood when I heard a familiar voice. "Ethan." I turned to see a young woman standing under the streetlight. She had long, dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold a depth of knowledge far beyond her years. "Who are you?" I asked, my heart racing. "My name is Clara," she said, stepping closer. "I've been looking for you. I know what you did at the mansion. I need your help." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. "What do you mean? How do you know about that?" She glanced around nervously. "Because I've been experiencing the same things Emily did. The fog, the whispers. And I think I'm in danger." The weight of her words settled heavily on me. "What do you need me to do?" "Help me understand what's happening," she pleaded. "Help me stop it before it's too late." I looked into her eyes, seeing the same fear and determination that had driven Emily. I knew I couldn't turn my back on her. "All right," I said, taking a deep breath. "Let's figure this out together." As we walked through the fog-covered streets of Fogwood, I couldn't help but feel a sense of déjà vu. The supernatural world was not done with me yet. But this time, I was prepared. I had Emily's love and courage guiding me, and a new ally in Clara. Together, we would face whatever darkness lay ahead, knowing that love and determination could overcome even the most formidable of foes. The journey with Clara took unexpected twists and turns, uncovering deeper mysteries about the town of Fogwood and its supernatural ties. With each step, I felt Emily's presence, her spirit a guiding force. In the end, we managed to uncover and thwart a dark entity that had been preying on the town for decades. Clara, with her bravery and insight, became a close friend and ally, and together we ensured that Fogwood remained a place of peace and safety. I returned to my life, forever changed by the experiences and the people I had met. Emily's memory remained a constant source of strength and inspiration. And as the fog lifted, revealing a brighter future, I knew that love and courage could conquer any darkness.